What does it feel like to walk into a room full of whispers and mocking glances, knowing you're the punchline of a cruel family joke? I'd spent 27 years finding out. My name is Clara Evans, the black sheep of a family that prided itself on wealth, status, and perfect appearances. They'd always seen me as the odd one out, no trust fund, no elite connections, just a stubborn heart and a job at a small bookstore that barely paid the rent. When my cousin Emily's wedding invitation arrived, embossed in gold and smelling faintly of lavender, I knew I'd be walking into a lion's den. But I went anyway, clutching the tattered edges of my pride. The venue was a spectacle of opulence, a sprawling estate draped in roses and twinkling lights. My family stood in clusters, their designer outfits gleaming under chandeliers, their laughter sharp as glass. I wore a simple navy dress I'd found on clearance, the hem slightly frayed from years of wear. As I stepped through the grand doors, alone, the room seemed to pause. Then came the snickers, the sidelong glances, the whispers loud enough to sting. "Clara?" "She actually showed up?" my aunt hissed. "No date, no surprise," Emily's sister sneered, her voice carrying across the ballroom. I straightened my spine, forcing a smile, and took my seat at the farthest table, where the caterers had forgotten to light the candles. I'd always been the outcast. Growing up, my cousins flaunted their private schools and European vacations while I patched my jeans and studied by lamplight in our cramped apartment. My mother, a single parent who'd been disowned from marrying, beneath the family, taught me to find strength in solitude. "You don't need their approval," she'd said before she passed, her voice soft but fierce. "You are enough." I clung to those words now, though they felt like fragile armor against the weight of their scorn. As the ceremony began, I focused on the flickering candlelight, trying to drown out the murmurs. Emily glided down the aisle, radiant in her custom gown, her groom a polished heir to some tech fortune. The vows were perfect, the applause thunderous, and I clapped along, invisible in my corner. But then, the doors behind me swung open with a heavy creak, and a hush fell over the room. Footsteps echoed, deliberate and unhurried. I turned, and there he was, a man in a tailored suit, his presence commanding the space like a storm rolling in. Whispers rippled anew, but this time, they weren't about me. "Is that Marcus Kane?" someone gasped. The name sent a jolt through me. Marcus Kane, the billionaire entrepreneur whose face graced magazine covers, whose tech empire reshaped industries. He was a legend, untouchable, the kind of man who didn't attend small-town weddings unless they were televised. Yet here he was, his sharp green eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. He smiled a small, knowing curve of his lips and walked straight to my table. "Clara," he said, his voice low and warm, "mind if I join you?" The room spun. My family's jaws dropped, their eyes wide with disbelief. I nodded, too stunned to speak, as Marcus pulled out the chair beside me and sat down, his presence a shield against the stares. "I hope I'm not too late," he said, leaning closer. Traffic was a nightmare. I blinked, my mind racing. How did he know my name? Why was he here, sitting next to me, acting like we were old friends? The truth unraveled in fragments, like a story I'd forgotten I was part of. Months ago, at the bookstore where I worked, a man had come in late one evening, browsing the poetry section. He was unassuming, dressed in a plain jacket, asking for obscure titles by Rumi and Neruda. We'd talked for hours, debating metaphors and sipping cold coffee from the shop's machine. He'd come back a few times, always quiet, always curious, never mentioning his name. I'd known him as James, a regular who tipped generously and listened intently. I had no idea he was Marcus Kane. As the reception unfolded, Marcus stayed by my side, his presence drawing curious glances and nervous smiles from my family. Emily approached, her perfect smile faltering. "Clara, you didn't tell us you knew Mr. Kane." Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes betrayed her envy. I shrugged, my heart pounding. "We met at the bookstore," I said simply, and Marcus chuckled, his hand brushing mine under the table. But the real twist came later, during the toasts. A woman in a crimson dress stood up, her face unfamiliar but her voice sharp with purpose. "I'd like to say something," she declared, holding a glass of champagne. The room turned to her, confused. She introduced herself as Lila, a journalist who'd been investigating my family's business dealings for years. "The Evans family has built their fortune on lies," she said, her words cutting through the festive hum. "Their wealth comes from exploiting workers and dodging taxes. I have proof, and it's going public tomorrow." Gasps erupted. My uncle's face turned ashen, my aunt dropped her fork. Lila's eyes met mine, and she gave a small nod, as if I were part of her plan. I wasn't, but her revelation shifted something in me. All my life, I'd felt inferior to my family's wealth, their status, their perfect facade. Now, that facade was crumbling, and I felt a strange relief. They weren't untouchable. They were flawed, just like me. Marcus leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Lila's been after them for years. I tipped her off after I saw how they treated you." My breath caught. He'd noticed me, not just as a bookstore clerk, but as someone worth defending. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He smiled, his eyes softening. "Because you're real, Clara. You don't pretend to be something you're not. That's rarer than you think." The night wore on, and my family's laughter turned to hushed arguments and hurried exits. Emily's wedding, meant to be their crowning moment, became their unraveling. I stayed, dancing with Marcus under the twinkling lights, feeling lighter than I ever had. He wasn't there to save me, he didn't need to. He was there because he saw me, the way my mother always had. And for the first time, I saw myself too. As we left the venue, the night air cool against my skin, Marcus offered me his arm. "You know," he said, "I've been looking for someone to help me start a literacy foundation. I think you'd be perfect." I laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" He grinned, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Stick around, Clara. You haven't seen anything yet." Walking away from that wedding, I wasn't the girl who'd arrived alone, weighed down by years of judgment. I was Clara Evans, enough as I was, with a billionaire by my side and a story just beginning. The family who laughed at me would read about their downfall in the morning papers, while I stepped into a future I'd never dared to dream. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't in proving others wrong, but in finding the courage to walk your own path and discovering who walks with you.